When Taehyung and his father first arrived in Seoul, the air was filled with excitement and anticipation. Taehyung, a bright young boy from a small town, had never set foot in the big city before. His father, a hard-working man, had saved for months to make this trip possible. The bustling streets of Seoul were overwhelming yet exhilarating for the pair, who were ready to start a new chapter in their lives. As they exited the train station, Taehyung's eyes widened at the towering buildings and the sea of people rushing past. They were both a little unsure of how to navigate this new environment, but they trusted that their adventure would go smoothly. After a few moments of observation, they decided to hail a taxi to take them to their hotel, which was supposed to be just a short distance away. A taxi pulled up, and the driver, with a seemingly warm smile, beckoned them inside. Taehyung's father handed the driver a piece of paper with the hotel's address written on it. The driver nodded confidently and started the meter. Neither Taehyung nor his father had much experience with the city's taxi system, but they trusted the driver to take them directly to their destination. As the taxi weaved through the crowded streets, Taehyung and his father gazed out of the windows in awe. The city was vast, filled with neon lights, high-rise buildings, and street vendors selling everything imaginable. Taehyung was enthralled by the new sights and sounds, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. After what seemed like an unnecessarily long drive, Taehyung's father began to grow suspicious. He had been told that the hotel was only a 10-minute ride from the station, yet they had been driving for nearly 30 minutes. His father, unfamiliar with Seoul's layout, asked the driver if they were going the right way, to which the driver responded with a reassuring nod. Despite the driver's reassurance, Taehyung's father couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He pulled out his phone and checked the map, realizing that they had passed their destination a while ago. He asked the driver again, but this time, his voice was more firm, expressing concern about the direction they were headed. The driver, sensing the growing tension, finally admitted in broken Korean that he was taking the scenic route to avoid traffic. Taehyung's father knew then that they had been deceived. The driver had intentionally taken them on a longer route to rack up the fare, exploiting their unfamiliarity with the city. Taehyung's father felt a surge of anger, but he remained calm. He demanded that the driver stop immediately and let them out. The driver hesitated for a moment, but after seeing the determination in Taehyung's father's eyes, he pulled over. They paid the fare, which was much higher than it should have been, and stepped out of the taxi. Standing on the sidewalk, Taehyung's father tried to shake off the frustration. He didn't want their first experience in Seoul to be tainted by the dishonesty of one person. However, he couldn't help but feel disappointed that they had been taken advantage of. Taehyung, sensing his father's frustration, tried to lift his spirits by pointing out the nearby street food stands, suggesting they grab a bite to eat. The two of them sat down at a small stall, ordering some tteokbokki and oeting. The warmth of the food comforted them, and slowly, the tension began to melt away. As they ate, Taehyung's father apologized for not being more cautious. He had wanted their first day in Seoul to be perfect, and the taxi driver's deceit had left a sour taste in his mouth. Taehyung, always optimistic, shrugged it off. He told his father that it was just a small bump in the road, and that they still had plenty of time to enjoy the city. His positive attitude lifted his father's spirits, and they both agreed that they wouldn't let this minor setback ruin their trip. After finishing their meal, they decided to walk to their hotel, using the map on Taehyung's father's phone to guide them. It wasn't far, and the walk allowed them to explore the city at their own pace. They marveled at the architecture, the busy streets, and the vibrant energy that seemed to pulse through every corner of Seoul. When they finally arrived at the hotel, they were both exhausted but relieved. The hotel was cozy, with a welcoming atmosphere that helped them feel more at ease after the day's ordeal. As they settled into their room, Taehyung's father couldn't help but reflect on the lesson they had learned that day. The next morning, with renewed energy and a more cautious approach, Taehyung and his father set out to explore Seoul properly. This time they did their research, used reliable maps, and avoided taxis altogether. They used public transportation instead, which proved to be more efficient and far less stressful. As the days went by, Taehyung and his father found themselves falling in love with the city. They visited famous landmarks, tried new foods, and soaked in the culture. Despite the rocky start, their experience in Seoul turned out to be more fulfilling than they had imagined. They both agreed that the deception by the taxi driver, though frustrating, had taught them an important lesson about staying alert and cautious in unfamiliar situations. It hadn't ruined their trip. Rather, it had made them more determined to make the most of their time in the city. By the end of their stay, Taehyung's father felt more confident navigating Seoul, and they had created many fond memories together. The incident with the taxi driver had become just a small anecdote in the larger story of their adventure. Taehyung, always the optimist, joked about how the driver had unintentionally given them a longer tour of the city. His father chuckled, appreciating how his son always managed to find the silver lining in any situation. As they boarded the train to return home, Taehyung and his father looked back on their time in Seoul with fondness. They knew that this trip would be something they'd remember for the rest of their lives. Though their journey had started with deceit, it had ended with a deeper understanding of the world around them, and a stronger bond between father and son. As Taehyung and his father settled into their seats on the train, they reflected on how much they had learned during their time in Seoul. The city had been everything they imagined, busy, vibrant, and full of life, but it had also thrown a few unexpected challenges their way. That initial taxi ride was a reminder that not everyone they met would be trustworthy, but it also showed them the importance of resilience and staying positive. During their days in Seoul, they had gone beyond just seeing the sights. Taehyung had visited Gyeongbokgung Palace, where he marveled at the historical grandeur of Korean royalty, and they had spent an afternoon exploring the bustling streets of Myeongdong, trying out different street foods and shopping for souvenirs. The beauty of Namsan Tower at night had left them both in awe as they looked out over the sparkling city skyline. The incident with the taxi driver, which had initially caused them so much frustration, had faded into the background. It was no longer the defining moment of their trip. Instead, it became a funny story to tell, one of those travel misadventures that made the experience all the more memorable. Taehyung often joked with his father about how that long, unintended drive had allowed them to see parts of the city they wouldn't have otherwise discovered. Taehyung's father had also become more comfortable in the city. He had grown adept at using Seoul's efficient subway system, and he had even started to recognize certain areas by sight. The initial feeling of being lost in a sea of strangers had transformed into a sense of belonging, even if just for a short while. The people they met afterwards were kind and helpful, which reassured them that their first impression had been a fluke. By the time they were ready to leave Seoul, both father and son had gained new perspectives. They understood that the challenges they faced, including being deceived, were just part of the experience of stepping outside their comfort zone. They had learned to adapt, to keep their guard up while still embracing the excitement of the unknown. Back home, Taehyung's friends were eager to hear all about his adventures in Seoul. He told them about the tall skyscrapers, the bustling streets, and the incredible food, but he didn't leave out the part about the taxi driver. It became one of the first stories he shared, how he and his father had been tricked on their very first day, but how they managed to laugh about it in the end.